All right. So thank you for joining the Change to Protocols.io free plans webinar. I'm Lenny Teytelman. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Protocols.io. I'm a geneticist, both experimental and computational biologist by training, did a PhD, did a postdoc, and it was my postdoc experience and the frustration with correcting a method that I was using that led me to co-found Protocols.io. And those of you who are joining have probably been using Protocols.io already. So this is not an introductory webinar to Protocols.io. You're probably joining because you got an email from me with a heads up around the change to the Protocols.io free plans, where the number of free private protocols that people have is going down from 5 to 2 on May 15th. The number of total public protocols that you can share continues to be unlimited and free. So it's a change to the number of private protocols on the free plans. And the idea for this webinar is to give a little bit of context to why we're changing it, what to do if you don't have a site license at your institution and don't have lab funds or company funds to pay for Protocols.io, but are using it and need to share. So we'll go over some of that. Actually, let's switch to the agenda. And then I mentioned for those who are in academia of things you can do to actually make Protocols.io unlimited and premium without having to pay from your own credit card or the laboratory credit card. And then we'll go into Q&A. But again, as I just said a moment ago, we have other members of the Protocols.io team on this webinar. So if you click on the Q&A button, you can ask a question without waiting to the end, and then either someone will reply by typing, or when we get to the Q&A for the webinar, we'll touch on it then. And I want to start with sort of the background for our business model evolution. And we launched Protocols.io in 2014. And in the beginning, I was very set with my co-founders. We were set on making it completely free for academics, both private use and public use. Our thinking was the mission of Protocols.io is to create a public knowledge base of research methods. We want this as a crowdsourced tool, and we need the crowd. We need people coming and sharing, and to build that knowledge base, it needs to be free for academics. So that was our original thinking. And we tried a number of business models that didn't work, getting creative with ways that we could charge others, but not the researchers who are using the tool. So charging reagent vendors, charging for ads. We kept thinking of different ways to make it completely free. And we had some partial success, but mostly that wasn't working very well. And a pivotal moment for me came in 2018 when I read a book called Supporting Research Communications, a guide. And some of you might actually recognize the names. These are the authors here are some of the most progressive people in science publishing and research infrastructure. Many of them used to work for Public Library of Science and are now in different places continuing to innovate. And in 2018, they published this ebook. It's available on Zenodo. There is a link I'll add to the chat for those who are interested. They published this ebook for supporters, and they said, who do we mean by supporters? It's funders, institutions, publishers, the infrastructure providers, which would be Protocols.io, libraries of universities, researchers, and others. So everyone who's involved in the ecosystem. And it was the book was sort of a manifesto for changing how we're funding research infrastructure and what models exist. They highlighted a lot of the issues with the way we currently fund projects like Protocols.io and innovation, that there is, from the funder perspective, there is just an example of one of the things the book talks about. There is a bias towards funding new things to be built at the expense of uh, support for things that already exist. And that includes open source software, model organism databases, and things like that. So, and thank you, Emma, for putting the link to the book. It's a really good read. And so they offer certain solutions. They highlight the challenges. And one thing that struck me when I was reading it, I remember I was flying on a plane to a conference or from a conference, and I was reading the book. And then I got to one of the pages that talks about the business models. And they said researchers have increasingly begun to rely on third parties, often commercial, which would include protocols.io, to provide them with free tools and services. But this route is also fraught. Because the interests of the third parties are likely to be out of alignment with the researcher. If the product is free, then you're the product has become a well-known refrain for describing the otherwise hidden trade-off using internet services that are free of charge. Use of these services often entails an implicit trade. The researcher hands over rights or data or metadata to the service for unrestricted use in return for being able to use the quote unquote free service. Rather than continuing to use free and easy solutions provided by these third parties, we need funds and investments in infrastructure with similar goals and aligned with community's interest. And this passage in the book was striking to me because we were trying to do this free for academic, figure out someone else we can charge for data, for analytics. And I thought we're very much aligned with researchers. We're open science, we're open access, we're trying to improve reproducibility. How much better can it be? But I kept in my mind coming back over the next couple of weeks, coming back to this paragraph and thinking, I think they have a point, they're right. And so it was 2018 when we sent an email similar to the one we sent recently about change plans, where we said that Protocols.io will continue always to be free for public sharing, but we are going to be charging whether academic or industry or private use. And that went live sometime in 2018 or 19. And then 2019 is when we also started offering enterprise campus-wide institutional plans. So we're very open about what the business model is now. If you come to protocols.io, we, in our FAQ, we describe what the business model is, who funds us. We do say we're an independent for-profit organization. We mentioned generous support, grant funding support from Gordon Betty Moore Foundation, Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. We also had funding from Open Philanthropy Foundation, Open Philanthropy Project, and then investments from a few individuals and largely EBSCO Information Services, which is in the publishing space and database solution space, and the Genetic Society of America. And while we're grateful for the grant funding, coming back to the book, it's not, people sometimes think, oh, if they have funding from Chan Zuckerberg Initiative or Moore Foundation, why do they even need to charge? Protocols.io should be completely free. But the truth is, just as the book describes, you never want a tool that relies on funding alone, because funder strategies and mandates change, people come and go. Philanthropic funders change direction all the time. But more importantly, it's not that you just can't rely on that, and you need sustainable business models for tools like Protocols and companies like Protocols.io. But more importantly, every grant that we got, it was very clear that it's temporary. And the funders always wanted to hear, what is the business plan? They wanted to see us moving towards sustainability. And the structure of the grants was always such that we knew that with each year, with each month, we have to do our best to move Protocols.io to sustainable long-term solution, and not expect and take for granted philanthropic support. So we were never under the illusion that we can just rely on grant funders. And that's why all the thoughts about business model and how to enable and support long-term public sharing of protocols on protocols.io and continuing to grow that knowledge base while at the same time having a sound, responsible fiscal model underneath. So 2018 and 19 is when we started offering institutional plans for universities to sign up, site licenses for biotechs, and where is it? There we go. And if you come to protocols.io, we have a link from the very top to the plans, and you can see exactly what you get from the free account, what you get from the paid account. And so this is for industry. It is significantly discounted. If you're in academia, it's significantly discounted. It's not $35.99, but you can see on the left-hand side is the free use of protocols.io for public sharing, and then the paid plans and the site licenses that I was talking about. So let's also switch to the academic side, and you can see the free versus the $15.99 paid, and then the campus-wide plans that I mentioned. So the part that's changing is the number of private protocols. I think you saw over here. It used to be up to 5 free private protocols on protocols.io. If you're using it in free mode, and if you try to create a 6th protocol, we ask you to either publish some of your existing protocols or to pay. And what's changing is that this number becomes 2. So if you try to create a 3rd private protocol, you'll get a pop-up that asks you to either pay or publish some of your existing protocols. And one of the reasons for this change and why we have the webinar to explain it is this is in line with that iteration through business models and how to make protocols.io sustainable. And what we found out is if too many people are using protocols.io in the free mode, then when we come to the university, when we talk about the site license, when we're having the conversation with librarians, they ask, well, if most people are using it for free, is it really a product that we need to pay for? Maybe that's sufficient. So if we are too permissive, then it sort of sets us back in trying to reach sustainability. And the long-term goal for protocols.io is not to make every researcher pay. If you're in academia, we don't expect you to pay. If you're in a pharmaceutical or biotech, we expect that most of you will be eventually covered by the site licenses that we have more and more of. But if there isn't at all any pressure for the researchers that are using protocols.io to either advocate for a site license with their university or their company or to pay, then it becomes very difficult for protocols.io to sign up universities. So this is something since 2019 that has become clear to us. And we've had many conversations with librarians where they will ask us how many people are at our university using protocols.io, how many of them pay, and if the answer is no one pays or there's only one team, then the library can reasonably conclude, well, then maybe we just let that one group pay for it and everyone else uses it in free mode. So there's a pressure on protocols.io if we want to reach the point where most universities have a site license and it is indeed free for academics, for private use and public sharing. We do need to be a little bit more strict in terms of how much we're giving away for free use. So this is sort of the background. This is the background to the change. But as I said in the agenda, I also wanted to talk about what options you have if you're about to publish a research paper, if you don't have lab funds, and even if you are advocating for your company or institution to have a site license, that can take months or sometimes even years. So that's not a quick short-term thing necessarily. So I did want to go over what options are available to you if you're already using protocols.io, but you bump into that limit and don't have lab funds to pay. So the first thing is that if you're on the plans page, let's switch to academic. If you're on the plans page and you scroll down, you will see we have a waiver program called Academic Research Program. So if you navigate to that, it's a simple form you fill out. This is meant for people that don't have lab funds to pay for a workspace, that $15.99 per person per month. And you tell us where you are, a little bit about your research. And this is meant for people that are trying to publish a paper, and maybe you have 10 protocols accompanying your paper, and the limit of 2 private ones is just insufficient. So this is a very quick and simple thing you can do, and you'll get a 3-month premium coupon where you can temporarily upgrade your workspace. So that helps you to publish, or that helps you to get started on protocols.io, or to pilot protocols.io within your research team in full premium mode before you assess whether you want to pay for it or not. So this is one thing to keep in mind. The other thing is, if you're signed into protocols.io and you bump against that ceiling of the free private protocols and you're trying to create a third private one, keep in mind that there is a link there which says invite friends, which takes you to this form. And if you invite a person to protocols.io and they join, the number of private protocols you can have in your account increases. So the person that you invite will have extra private protocols available to them. Instead of 2, they'll have 3, and you'll have an additional protocol. And you can send multiple invitations. So if there are 10 classmates or 10 people in your research team that you invite, then all of a sudden, instead of 2 free private protocols, if those 10 people join, you'll have 12, and that obviously is a much better workspace restriction than 2. So inviting colleagues is a way to increase that ceiling. And the last thing that I wanted to say is if the lab funds or research team funds are indeed quite limited. Back. So the other thing I was going to say is if your lab funds are limited and you have 15 people in your research team, and even the academic rate of $16 per person per month becomes prohibitively expensive. An option, it's not ideal. Of course, we want everyone to be covered by site licenses and have completely unrestricted use. But if you create a single person workspace, then it's just $16 a month if you're in academia, $35 if you're in industry. And one thing to keep in mind is if you have just a single person in the workspace, then you're not paying per protocol, you're paying per number of people in a workspace. So if you have a single person workspace, you're paying $16 a month. And within that workspace, if you invite other people, if you invite an additional person, it becomes an extra $16 per person per month. If you have 10 people in the group, it's going to be $160 per month because we do charge per member. But what I wanted to say is, if you create a workspace, you have unlimited private protocols. Keep in mind that with every protocol that you have, there is a share button. that allows you to send a link. So this is a private link to a protocol that you can send to your collaborators. So without inviting someone into the workspace, this is not complete collaborative environment, but you can share protocol with someone without inviting them into the workspace. You can get this private link, or you can share with someone by email. And if you're not adding them to the workspace, your cost doesn't increase. They can still collaborate with you on the protocol that you've shared. So this is a private protocol that I have. Obviously, you can always publish protocols, and then there is no cost. But if you are limited by your funding, then create a workspace, put in as many protocols as you need. And even though it's not ideal, but you can use the share button instead of inviting people to the workspace to invite them to collaborate on specific individual protocols. And that does not increase the cost. And so then it's fairly affordable at the $16 if you're in academia per month. And last but not least, if you do use protocols.io, if you find it helpful and would like to have it unlimited in your company or in your university, if you're in academia, then protocols.io/institutions is something that you can recommend. These campus-wide plans is something you can recommend to your Office of Research or to your science librarian or the acquisitions librarian. And again, what we've learned since 2019, particularly for academia, is that librarians wait for requests from their researchers before they sign up for a tool. This is how they prioritize. This is how they know that they're getting something that the community really needs. So if you're using protocols.io and you want it to be unlimited without you having to pay for it, reach out to your library and put in a request, or let them know that you use protocols.io and would love to see an institutional campus-wide license for it. And the last thing for academic side, the last thing that I want to share on that is we have, it's not just the protocols that are open access on protocols.io, but we have an open contract, academic for academic site licenses, and there's transparent pricing that the librarian, the university can see in the last step. And for most universities, when they get started, it really is just $15,000 a year, which is, with some publishers, the cost of a single paper when you publish a research paper in some journals. This is essentially what you'll pay just for one paper, but on protocols.io, these are the tiers, and for most universities, $15,000 a year gives unlimited use, to everyone on campus for research and teaching. So in the long run, that's where we hope most researchers will be, is under these campus-wide plans. And as I said, we rolled them out in 2019. And there were just a handful of universities that signed up in 2019, 2020, but that number is growing. And you can see, if you go to the institutions page, if you're in academia, you can see if your university has a plan, but there are more and more that are signing up for these site licenses that make it premium and unlimited to everyone. And our vision and hope is that whether, as I said, whether in industry or in academia, it's not the individual researchers that will be paying, but it's the organizations that sign up, and then you don't have to worry about it. So I will stop there and transition to the Q&A. And thank you everyone who's attending. And again, the link to that book, it's a really interesting read. The link to that book, Emma Ganley has shared in chat. And if there are no questions, my email is lenny@protocols.io. So if you don't want to ask here, I can check on the Q&A. I don't think there are questions. But if you don't want to ask here, you can always email me any questions that you have. And maybe I can stop recording and then people can sort of ask questions off the record. Thank you, Emma, for sharing the emails. So info@protocols for general inquiries. And if you want to reach out to me directly, that's lenny@protocols.io. And thank you to everyone who is watching the video. And thank you to everyone who attended in person.